Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome to my channel, and this is my bro Jay, who hangs out with me a lot while I do art, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to work on this little book that I finished a while back, and the page that we're going to work on is this, and I'll show you how to fix dried waterproof ink. Are you crunching? What are you crunching? If you've been using dip pens a while, you probably have come across waterproof ink. It is wonderful and there's so much you can do with it. However, when it dries up, what do you do? Especially if you're using it in an inkwell. This has worked for me even on the crustiest of inks. So really, in a pinch, there is only one thing you need, and that is isopropyl alcohol in a very high percentage. I'm using 91%. Another very helpful thing is something to add it to your ink. Today I'm using one of these since it's what I had on hand, and I'm going to take that alcohol and I'm going to pour it into my little bottle. If you're using a pipette or an eyedropper, you can just like suction some up in there. Make sure you place the top on there and then label it. Always want to label it. Next, you're going to take that dropper and you're going to drop some drops in your ink. It may take more than a few drops, but then you'll start to mix it up and you'll notice if it's working or not. Now, if you remember how much ink was in your inkwell, you can keep on adding to kind of get it back to consistency that you like. Now, I kept on adding and now I'm stirring. I'm just using the end of a paintbrush. Be careful when you're stirring because if it's in an inkwell or a candlestick holder like what I'm using, it could go all over the place. A good idea is to not do what I'm about to do. So here's my little book and I am so excited to use it that I decided, well, I'm just going to test it out in my book. But it's always a good idea to test it out in a scrap paper. So let's see if it works. Oh my gosh. And it does. So look at that. My ink has been reclaimed from like a gel sticky substance to nice flowing ink. And there you go. It's working. It's working great. Now, it may take a little bit of time. If it doesn't work at first, what you can do is you can keep on adding alcohol to it, or you can add more ink if you need to, just to see if you can reclaim it. It's always worth a shot. Save you some money. So we're going to work on this page if you'd like to stick around, but that's really how you add ink. But I'd love for you to stay and join me. This little book I finished quite a bit ago, but I have yet to try stuff in it. Oh, look, the ink, it's bleeding. There's one thing to think about when you're working with ink that you have reclaimed with alcohol. If you notice a clear border or halo around your ink, that just means the alcohol wasn't always fully mixed up, and you can leave it, you can mix it up more, or you can just work with it. It will dry, but I kind of liked it, so I kept it. I always feel guilty for throwing scraps away. So when I make books, I save all my scraps that are usable, which is almost everything. So this is just drawing paper, and I have dyed it in coffee, and I've actually put some salt in it. So it has this weird texture. And in an odd way, it sometimes feels like fabric. I know that sounds really strange, but it's working for this little book. And I've decided to keep this book black, gold, and white. So you'll see this coming up very soon. This is such a powerful black ink that I'm going to stop with this for now. And to clean off my nib, I'm going to use some of that alcohol and just rub it across it, wipe it off, and then we're clean and good to go. It takes a few seconds to do this, but it's better than soaking it in the alcohol I found, and I'm able to clean it off better. And then I just cover up my ink with plastic wrap. Now I'm going to grab my acrylics. I can't wait to use my shell again. I have been cleaning it off every time, but I think I'm going to let it start piling up. So I figure if I just use white and gold and maybe pearl or silver on it, it'll look like jewels. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I can always clean it off. The first step I'm going to do is go in and start adding highlights. So the paper is a mid-tone, right? It's coffee colored. And then I added my darks. And now I'm going back and popping my highlights. And the moment I do, it's just so much fun because this doodle starts to come alive. Because now we have the extremes. We have the darkest darks that we put in first, and now popping in those lightest lights. I finished my art degree 20 years after I began it. Like, life happened, but I remember when I went back and did my internships as an adult, I worked with this art teacher, and it's probably been about 8 years ago, and she told me that always put your darkest darks by your lightest lights, or your lightest lights by your darkest darks. She was telling her students this all the time, and oh my goodness, she was right. It makes such a big difference. So now when I work with students, I'm like, hey, put in your darks first, put in your darks first, and it will give you your value scale. And then go ahead and put in those lightest lights. Make sure you pop them right by those darkest darks, and it makes your artwork come alive. And then you got that lovely contrast going on between the two extremes. So I like to work the extremes first and then go back in with my midtones. And right now I'm still adding highlights. It is really hard for me to stop because once I get on the kick, but what's neat, if you're like me and you have a hard time stopping, is that you can always dial it back. You can always go back in and overlay some more value over the top. I am watering down the white acrylic a little bit because I don't want it to be so blinding white. So it's just mixed with water. As I go back in, I can see some of the dark line underneath, which I like. Now this is just cheap white acrylic craft paint, and I don't mind it at all. I kind of like that it's flowy, and it was only like 97 cents. So I'm going to keep on adding it in here and keep on adding it in. And I'm probably going to put in too much because usually that's what I normally do. The brush I'm using, I got on sale. It is like half off on clearance. And it works really well. I like it because he's super tiny and I can go in and get in all the little cracks. And another cool thing about watering down your paint is that it allows you to create translucent layers. But for this dark line, it's kind of bugging me. I'm going back and I'm not watering down my paint as much so I can start to eliminate some of the thickness because it just felt like it was distracting. So it could be that I added so much white around it, but that's okay. I'm going to go back and doctor it up to where my heart is happy. And I think that's it. Might be winding down on the use of the white acrylic pretty soon. I'm going to take out that black line and feather it out a little bit, and then maybe pop a little bit more around the base of the eye. It makes me think of eyeliner, which I never wear anymore, but I always enjoy seeing. And feather that out a little bit, trying to still see some of the black underneath. Now, I think we're done with acrylic. Let's switch to pen. So I'm just using everyday ballpoint pens. One is a little more feathery, and this one right here is a little bit more dark. And I think I'm going to use this one first more. And I'm going to start getting all the little cracks, going to reclaim some of my midtones, and then go back in and kind of feather it so that I connect the darkest darks and blend them towards those lightest lights. And this is what it looks like now. I sped it up a little bit, and I'm going to use scumbling because, you know, I love scumbling. I like to cut back into the white paint, find the cracks, and then cut back into it. And it's weird, but I don't know how to explain it except I'm finding the textures in the paint and basically tracing them. The paint is showing me the way. If I see a crack, I just go and I fill it with the little ballpoint pen, and it works really well. I felt like the dip pen was kind of bold, and the ballpoint pen is a little bit more mellow, and he can sneak in there and give me some lovely faint textures. Kind of going overboard, just like I did with the white paint. But I feel like I'm wrapping up the ballpoint pen and I'm feeling the pull to go back to the acrylic. So here we are again with our cheap white acrylic, going back and starting to reclaim some of those highlights that I accidentally covered up. It's basically a push-pull process where you push it lighter and then you pull it darker and then you push it lighter again and then you pull it darker again until you're happy. And then you can stop. It's never really done. You could still keep on working on it, but in this case, I'm finding some highlights that now that I've added that ink back, I'm thinking, this needs to come back out. I need to pull this back out. I need to push that back. Feeling the need to reclaim some of these little bitty pieces and just dabbing it in there. If it goes back over the ballpoint pen, not really worried about it. And I'm going to pop a few little more details in there. As I've gotten older, I have enjoyed being more loose with my brush strokes. Instead of wanting every little detail to be perfectly aligned, I'm letting go a little bit. It's very hard for me to do that, but it's become more freeing, and the more I do it, the more I let go. But I still, from my brain, I need to go back in and do some of these little bitty highlights and doodads. And I really have enjoyed lately taking the paintbrush and just running it down the side of whatever item I'm working on and letting it trail off. It doesn't really matter if it's a tiny drawing like this or painting like this or a large one. I like to turn my work all which way, so you probably notice that I keep on flipping it and keep on flipping it. And then I flip it again, and it helps me see things from a different angle. And I really would like my artwork or my journals to look good from every angle, and so I keep on turning it. And I think that might be good. I think we're good to go, and I want to add some of this brown ink. It is a brown ink. I'm going to have to find it over here so I can tell you what it is. It is Winsor Newton. It's just brown, Sepia calligraphy ink. And I'm not going to add much of this, but I do feel like I would like some rich brown popped back in there somehow. I really didn't dye this paper dark, and kind of needs more coffee color. Unlike the black ink, this is actually water-soluble ink, so when this ink dries up in my little inkwell, I can just add some drops of water. So I usually work with a mix of both waterproof ink and water-soluble ink. Waterproof ink for my base drawings, and then usually go back and layer water-soluble over the top. That way I don't have to worry about the base drawing smudging or moving around on me. But you know, it doesn't matter if they do. It just gives it more texture. And in other cases, I like them to bleed. It just depends on what I'm feeling that day. For the longest time, I worried, what is my style? I don't know what my style is. Well, when kids ask me what my favorite thing to do is, and I'm like, they're wanting to hear some of this profound, like, oh my gosh, I love to oil paint, or oh my gosh, I'm this or I'm that. And I just say, I love to doodle. I love to doodle. And I can draw a lot of different things. I can paint a lot of different things, but at my heart, I am a doodler. So on this channel, you're probably going to get a mix of a little bit of all different kinds of medium between pen and ink and watercolor and charcoal and printmaking, but in the end, they're probably going to be all doodles. So just giving you fair warnings, I like to take items from this real world and turn them in, transform them with imagination into random doodles. That's pretty much just what I do. And I make books too. Used to keep everything just black and white, no color, don't want color. And then this past year, I've fallen in love with iridescence and have gotten braver. So let's add a little bling. This is probably my favorite gold paint. It's by Golden, and it's not the cheapest, but I really love the shine. And so right now I'm going back in and popping in some little bits of gold here and there. I don't want to go overboard, but you know, I might. And let's see, what else can we do? I can water it down a little bit too and keep it kind of translucent. I don't really want it to smudge. I do have iridescent watercolors and I do have gold ink, but I really like the gold acrylic, and it is super duper shiny. I might not add much more. I'm thinking we're very close to being done. So let's go back in, add some on these tail ends over there, letting it trail in towards the middle, just a little bit here and there, and then let's look at it. We might need to call this thing good. This almost reminds me of putting on the last bits of jewelry before you go out on a big night out. And not that I go on a lot of big night outs, but it's like the bling. You're adding in the bits of bling before you make your debut. Anyway, it's like how I think about it. And I think we're about good. I think so. So look at that shine. Now, the rest of this book is not done, but that is soon to happen. And then we're due for a tour. Woohoo! Thanks for joining me. I had a great time with you. As always, happy arting.